So are you turned on, Larry?
I am recording.
No. It's lovely to be back. I've been away for 6 whole Sundays, and probably for the first time in my life, certainly the first time in my adult life, over the summer holidays and reading break, I didn't go to church once for the whole of my time off. It's extraordinary. But, crashing in on somebody's socially distanced, you have to register ahead of time. You're a stranger, you don't really belong here. Service seems a little bit of an odd thing to do. And I kind of had enough of being online by the time holiday time rolled around. So Heather and I did our sitting prayer at home Sunday mornings, but I wasn't in the church building for 6 weeks. It's kind of unbelievable. I'm not sure how I survived. And it's odd to come back to this whole new reality, to see a few lovely faces in front of me. I can't see you all on Zoom because you're behind me. In an ideal world, you'd be up on the screen that I'd be, so I could see you over there. But hopefully that'll come next week. But it's an odd experience to try to feel this experience we're having now as church, because it's not what we're accustomed to. It's not what any of us are accustomed to. It's not an 8 o'clock service. It's not a 9 o'clock service. It's not an 11:15 service. It's not even the Zoom service that we've become familiar with since March, April, May, June, July, August. Did we do it for 6 months? Wow, isn't that amazing? So you've had 6 months of Zoom church, now everything's changed again. And who knows what it will be like next week. There's just no way to predict. And coming back to church this morning with the reading assigned for our gospel reading from Matthew chapter 18 seems perhaps a challenging reality to face. And, it's every year when I come back from holiday, I think, I've done this, I don't think I can keep doing this. And then I get going and I think, I can do it a little bit longer. And then it feels better. And this, I looked at the readings and I thought, what am I going to do with this gospel? If the member refuses to listen, tell it to the church. And if the offender refuses to listen even to the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Oh, yay, I want to preach on that my first Sunday back in church. But everything in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 18, is oriented in one direction. It's all aimed at expressing Jesus' concern, Jesus' belief that it is important to be in relationship with people. All of the instructions that he gives in chapter 18 are focused on this idea that we need human connection. And the part we read this morning for our gospel expresses particularly Jesus' understanding that, that's not always easy. Sometimes human relationships are awkward. Sometimes they are difficult. Often they are challenging. Jesus wants us to understand the importance of persevering in making our human relationships work. And particularly now, at this time in our history, at this time in our society, at this time in our world, that's a particularly difficult challenge. At the best of times, human relationships are challenging. In the midst of COVID, maintaining human connection with anyone is particularly and acutely difficult. Many people are suffering from great isolation. And Jesus, the gospel reading this morning, would encourage us, I think, to find ways that we can continue to embody the reality that we were created to be together in some form or other. And I don't know, it's hard, we're trying to figure out what that could possibly look like. We're trying to make our way in establishing some sort of embodiment of corporate worship. Zoom, in this building, however we are able to do it. You know, one of the most enduring, lasting memories I have as a child of my father is my father sitting in his tall wingback chair in the corner of our living room at home on 1601 Belmont Avenue. And he has a funny little kind of wooden bookstand that folds, and when you open it, the wings of this little stand rest on the arms of your chair, and then there's a little adjustable resting thing for your book, and you put your book on there and it has little clips that flip up and keeps the pages in place. And I see my father sitting in this big wingback chair reading his book. And that's partly an enduring memory because it happened a lot. It was a very common occurrence. But I think it's mostly an enduring memory because when I see my father in that chair, sitting there with his book, peacefully and quietly reading, I can sense that he is deeply happy and totally content. He's doing what he loves to do, reading a book with nobody to interrupt him. Sometimes they say the apple doesn't fall very far from the tree, and I am my father's son. But my father also knew, and I also believe, that there is something essential in the human spirit that needs to gather with other people. That there is something in our spirit that needs this experience or that experience up on the screen of finding ways to bring our presences together. Jesus said, wherever 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I will be with them. And that doesn't mean, Jesus didn't mean by that when we don't gather, he's absent. Certainly not. You go out in creation, you see the mountains, the trees, the beauty of creation all around us this day, and you know there's a presence in that. But there is some essential energy force or transmission that takes place when people gather in the flesh or when they gather virtually. And even just seeing their faces and hearing their voices. That was Bruce and Kathy reading the lessons. You knew that. You could tell the sound of their voices. And just the sound of the voice communicates something deep and vital to us about being together and about the energy of that presence of God that draws us together in one place. In the gospel reading this morning, Jesus challenges us, I think, to affirm the importance of this exercise of trying to find ways to gather. And he does that particularly because he goes on immediately after this strong urging that if somebody is messed up or if somebody has offended you or if somebody has upset you, do everything in your power to try to find a way to make it right. And then he says, truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. And whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. We gather because we know we need to be loosed. We know that we need to find a way to be free. There are so many opportunities to be bound. There are so many things in life, the pressures, the urgency, the tensions, the anxieties, the fears of this time that cause us to constrict and to tighten. We come here or we appear at Zoom because we know we need to be reminded to open our hearts. We know we need to be reassured that we are free people. We are not, in fact, bound. There is nothing that needs to control us apart from the love and the presence and the goodness of God at work in our lives. When you come up in a moment, I hope you will, receive a little piece of bread. You do that as a reminder, as a sign of the reality that there is a true presence dwelling in our being, in our lives. In Christian tradition, we call that the presence of Jesus, the presence of love, of goodness, of truth, of light and beauty. And my father, sitting in his chair, would get himself up out of that chair every day, and walk down the street, down Belmont Avenue to the corner of Belmont and Begbie. And he would go into that little church on the corner there, St. Barnabas. He would celebrate the Eucharist every day. Some days there'd be 2 or 3 people there. Sundays there'd be a lot more, but he would do it every day because he believed that the presences of people coming together in heart and soul refreshed and renewed his spirit and deepened his awareness of the beauty and mystery of life. And that's why we're here. It's important, I think, in this time that we go back to the real basic realities of life. And the most fundamental reality of our lives that we need to take to heart and that we need to hold so profoundly is that we are, each of us, created in the image of God. What that means is that there is some similarity, some connection between us and the divine mystery of life. And therefore, we are not separate, we are not alone, we are not divided from one another. We are, in fact, a united body of love. The challenge is to find ways in this time of separation, this time when we are told to socially distance from one another, to find ways to embody that connection, as Shannon did so beautifully in the video, and she went and visited the McLeans and brought them. It's an embodiment of, that's the sacrament. That's the reality of communion. That's the Eucharist that we gather to share. We do it here or on the screen in order that our hearts may be challenged to draw that together. And, in a moment, Jennifer's going to pray, and there'll be names of people you don't even know. There'll be concerns that might not be your concern. But we bring it all together into one place at one time, and we hold it before God as a sign that all the concerns and all the cares and all the anxieties and all the fears, all the sickness, all the pain, all the turmoil in the world is in fact ultimately held by love. We don't need to fix it. It's good to do what we can to make the world a better place. What we need to do is rest and trust in that loving presence that is God's light at work in our lives. Because there is a power greater than us. Jesus says, I tell you, if 2 of you agree on earth about anything you ask, it will be done for you. There's only one thing on earth that 2 of us are ever going to agree about. And that is the reality of God's loving presence at work in the world. When we agree on that, and ask our hearts to open to that, prayer is answered. The prayer of love is always answered with the return of power and grace and goodness. Shannon said in the video, I'm not always able to be that loving presence to people, but she knows and we know, and we want the children to know. There is an energy field of love that carries us, that leads us forth from this place, from our encounter on screen, to go into the world and to be the loving presence of connection that binds us together in the oneness of God. There is ultimately no separate. It's funny, there's such an irony in Jesus' statement when he was encouraging his followers to preserve the bond of fellowship. And he says, finally, if the offender refuses to listen even to the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. How did Jesus treat Gentiles and tax collectors? Well, in Matthew 8, Jesus was confronted by a Roman centurion who asked for help for his servant. The Roman centurion was obviously a Gentile. Jesus said to the centurion, "Go, let it be done for you according to your faith." And his servant was healed in that hour. Jesus gave to a Gentile healing. How did Jesus treat tax collectors? Matthew's Gospel. As he sat at dinner in the house, many tax collectors and sinners came and were sitting with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" Jesus welcomed tax collectors, welcomed sinners, healed Gentiles. That's our challenge. We're all tax collectors, we're all sinners, we're all Gentiles, and we're all held and embraced by the loving presence of Christ in our lives.